I ran a multi-billion-dollar empire for 16 years, all while my boss thought he was in charge. When he fired me, he unknowingly handed me the keys to his kingdom and its total collapse. The key to Julian Croft's corner office wasn't metal. It was a 24-digit alphanumeric code that changed every 12 hours, generated by an algorithm I wrote a decade ago for his father. I was the only person besides the old man who knew the master override. After he passed, I was the only one, period. Julian, bless his heart, thought it was tied to his gold-plated corporate card. He'd just wave it imperiously at the panel, and I, from my desk just outside, would tap a few keys, and the door would hiss open. He thought it was voice-activated for him. "Open sesame," he'd sometimes say, with all the smug satisfaction of a toddler who thinks he's making the sun rise by screaming at it. For 16 years, I was the ghost in the Croft Innovations machine. My official title was Executive Aide to the CEO, which was the corporate equivalent of calling a brain surgeon a head masseuse. I ran everything. When old Mr. Croft had a brilliant, chaotic idea at 3 a.m., he'd call me, and I'd turn his napkin sketch into a functional schematic and a business plan by sunrise. I managed the private servers where the real R&D was kept, not the polished versions we showed to investors. I knew which notoriously difficult client needed a bottle of 25-year-old Macallan on his birthday, and which government official's son needed a consulting gig to grease the wheels on a multi-million-dollar contract. I was the company's memory, its conscience, and its dirty little secret keeper, all rolled into one. Mr. Croft used to call me his Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the gates of his empire. He trusted me with everything. Then he died, and the keys to the kingdom were handed to Julian. Julian, who saw the company not as a legacy to be nurtured, but as a shiny toy to be shown off. He had an MBA from a school his father's donation had probably built a library for, and he talked a lot about disruption and synergizing core verticals, but couldn't tell you where the main circuit breaker for the server farm was. In his first month, he tried to optimize our supply chain by switching to a cheaper vendor, nearly bankrupting us when their shoddy components failed federal inspection. I spent a week straight on the phone, calling in every favor I had accumulated over a decade and a half to salvage the deal and get our old supplier back. I rerouted funds from Julian's office wellness budget, which he'd allocated for a kombucha tap and a nap pod to cover the damages. When the crisis was averted, Julian clapped me on the back in a board meeting and said, "Good job implementing my revised strategy, buddy. See? Sometimes you have to break a few eggs." He genuinely believed he had fixed it. My job morphed from building an empire to desperately trying to keep a toddler from burning it down with a gold-plated lighter. I was his spell check, his calendar, his alarm clock, and the filter between his terrible ideas and the company's balance sheet. He wanted to rebrand our flagship security software, Aegis, to Synergy Guard Pro. I had to create a fake market research report showing the name would alienate our entire client base. He wanted to fire our head of engineering, a woman who had been with his father since the garage days, because he found her intimidating. I had to bury her transfer request under a mountain of paperwork so she could move to a new R&D department I created specifically for her, far away from Julian's fragile ego. The end came, as it so often does, over something utterly trivial. We were in a meeting with the board, presenting the quarterly earnings. I had prepared the presentation, the notes, the data, everything. All Julian had to do was read the teleprompter. But he decided to go off script, to freestyle, as he called it. He started promising a new product line, a venture into AI-driven predictive analytics, something we were at least 5 years away from even attempting. The board members, old friends of his father, looked confused. One of them, a sharp old vulture named Marcus Thorne, asked a simple technical question about the processing power required for such a feat. Julian froze. He had the look of a man who had just been asked to explain quantum physics in Mandarin. He glanced at the teleprompter, but the words he needed weren't there. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. I did what I always did. I leaned forward slightly and cleared my throat. "If I may, Mr. Thorne," I began. "Mr. Croft is referring to the new proprietary chipset we're developing in the Phoenix project. It leverages quantum-adjacent processing to reduce the server load, allowing for predictive modeling on existing hardware." It was complete and utter nonsense, of course. The Phoenix project was just what I called the new coffee machine I'd ordered for the break room, but it sounded plausible. It sounded like a Croft innovation solution. I saw the tension leave Julian's shoulders. The board nodded, satisfied. After the meeting, I thought he'd be grateful. I thought I'd get the usual condescending pat on the back. Instead, he called me into his office, that sterile white box that smelled of expensive leather and unearned confidence. He didn't ask me to sit. "You embarrassed me in there, Liam," he said, his voice cold. I was stunned. "What? Julian, I saved you. You were—" "I was improvising," he snapped. "I was creating a narrative, painting a vision, and you interrupted me with your technobabble. You made it look like I didn't know my own company." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. "With all due respect, Julian, you didn't. That question would have sunk you." He pointed a manicured finger at me. "That's the problem with you old-timers. You're stuck in the weeds. You have no vision. You're a relic of my father's era. Loyal, yes, but loyalty doesn't innovate." He walked over to his desk and pressed an intercom button. "Security to the CEO's office, please." My blood ran cold. "Julian, what are you doing?" "I'm synergizing," he said, a cruel little smirk on his face. "You're redundant. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. Pack up your desk. You have 5 minutes." 2 large security guards, men I'd known for years, appeared at the door, looking deeply uncomfortable. Julian waved a hand dismissively. "Escort Mr. Walsh from the premises, and make sure he doesn't take anything. Everything in his office, his computer, his files. It's all company property." The guard put a hand on my arm. I didn't resist. I was in a state of shock. 16 years. My entire professional life. Gone. As they walked me past my desk, I glanced at my monitor. It was locked, of course, but on the screen, a single line of text was visible. It was a recurring calendar alert I'd set up for myself years ago, a fail-safe for the company's most critical system, an automated maintenance script for the off-site, deep storage archives, the ones that held every patent, every contract, every piece of incriminating evidence against our rivals, and a few skeletons of our own. The ones Julian didn't even know existed. The script required a manual password reset every 30 days. Without it, per old Mr. Croft's paranoid instructions, the system would execute a full data wipe to prevent corporate espionage. It was due to run in 72 hours, and the only password that could stop it wasn't written down anywhere. It was in my head. The walk out of the building was the longest of my life. Every head that turned, every whispered conversation that fell silent as I passed, felt like a physical blow. These were people I'd hired, people whose kids' graduation parties I'd attended, people I'd fought for in budget meetings. Now they looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. I was a ghost already, a cautionary tale. The glass doors slid shut behind me, sealing me off from the only world I had known for my entire adult life. The city noise hit me like a wall, loud and chaotic after the climate-controlled hum of the office. For 16 years, I had a purpose every single morning. Now I just had the rest of the day. I went home to my sterile, quiet apartment, the kind of place a man who spends 80 hours a week at the office lives in. I sat on my couch and stared at my personal phone, waiting for it to ring. I expected a call within the hour. Someone from IT would notice a critical process hadn't been authorized. The automated market analysis report for our Asian investors would fail to generate. The encrypted nightly backup would hang. Something. Anything. But the phone remained silent. The first 24 hours were a strange kind of purgatory. Part of me, the part conditioned by 16 years of loyalty, screamed at me to call them, to warn them. I had a duty to Mr. Croft, to his legacy. But another colder part of me whispered that Julian was the one destroying that legacy. He was the cancer. My loyalty was to the company his father built, not the hollowed-out brand Julian was turning it into. Mr. Croft had built that data wipe failsafe for a reason. He was a paranoid genius who saw threats everywhere. He'd once told me, "Liam, a fortress can be taken from the outside, but it can only be truly destroyed from within. This is our self-destruct button, to be pushed only when the king is a madman." Was Julian a madman? No. He was worse. He was a fool who thought he was a king. The call I was expecting never came from the office. Instead, on the second day, a block number buzzed on my phone. It was Sarah, the head of engineering I'd saved from Julian's chopping block. "Liam." "Oh, thank God," she whispered, her voice strained. "Don't say anything. I'm in a stairwell. It's chaos here. Absolute chaos." "What's happening, Sarah?" I asked, my heart starting to pound. "He fired the entire legacy IT team this morning. Called them redundant assets. Brought in some slick consulting firm in matching polo shirts. They can't even figure out the primary cooling system for the main server farm. It's 100 degrees in there, Liam. The failsafes are screaming, but all the alerts are routed through a system only you have the credentials for. These new guys are trying to brute force their way in, talking about a hard reset. They're going to fry everything." I closed my eyes. The main farm. Not the deep archives, but the day-to-day operational core of the entire company. "They can't do that, Sarah. It'll corrupt every active project database." "I know," she hissed. "I tried to tell him. Julian. He just smiled and said it was the price of progress. He announced he's taking Marcus Thorne on a tour of the R&D vault this afternoon. He's been bragging all morning about the Phoenix project. He's actually trying to find it, Liam." A cold, grim satisfaction settled in my stomach. So, the fool was chasing the phantom I'd created for him. He was trying to open a door that didn't exist, to a room that was never built, to show off a project that was just a name for a coffee machine. "He won't find it," I said calmly. "That's not the point." Sarah's voice was getting frantic. "He's demanding access to the deep archives. He thinks the files are in there. The consultants told him the server is ghosted, that it doesn't seem to exist on the network. He's screaming at them, threatening their contract. He looks unhinged." So, it was beginning. The unraveling. The machine was starting to seize up without its ghost. Julian, in his infinite arrogance, had fired the one man who could give him what he wanted, and he didn't even realize it. He thought the keys to the kingdom were on his gold card. He was about to find out they were in the head of the man he'd just thrown out onto the street. I thanked Sarah for the information and told her to keep her head down. As I hung up, my own personal laptop pinged. It was an automated alert from a private monitoring system I'd set up years ago, a system that watched the company's digital heartbeat from afar. The alert was simple: cascading temperature warnings in server farm A, mainframe integrity at 78% and falling. Emergency coolant reserves have been activated. Manual override required within 12 hours. They were flying blind, burning down the engine room, while the captain bragged about the view from the bridge. The 72-hour clock on the deep archives was still ticking, but it turned out I had built more than one doomsday device. The company wasn't just going to die by silent data wipe in 2 days. It was going to start melting down right now. My phone rang again. This time the screen didn't say blocked. It lit up with the 2 words I had been both dreading and craving: Julian Croft. I looked at the call, then back at the critical warning on my laptop screen. The first domino was wobbling. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and hit ignore. The silence from my end must have driven Julian insane. He called 5 more times in the space of 10 minutes, each call more frantic than the last. Then the texts started. First, an imperious command: "Walsh, call my office. Now." Then, a slightly less confident plea: "Liam, it is having some issues. Need your input." And finally, a string of panicked gibberish about server temperatures and client portals being down. I saved a screenshot. It was beautiful. I let him stew for another hour while I made breakfast. I fried bacon, brewed a perfect cup of coffee, and sat on my balcony watching the city wake up. For the first time in 16 years, I wasn't watching it from behind the tinted glass of a skyscraper. I was just a man, eating breakfast. It felt peaceful. My laptop pinged again. Mainframe integrity at 62%. The client-facing servers, which handled billions in transactions, would be the first to go. I imagined the chaos, the frantic calls from banks, from logistics partners, from international clients. All of them funneled through a support system that was probably running on backup power and a prayer. Finally, a different number called. It was Marcus Thorne, the board member. He sounded exactly as I expected, like a man whose money was actively on fire. "Walsh," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "What in God's name is happening over here?" "Good morning, Marcus," I said calmly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Don't play games with me. The company is having a complete meltdown. Julian is running around like a headless chicken, blaming a new IT firm. The entire transaction network is offline. We're hemorrhaging money by the second. Julian fired you, didn't he?" "He eliminated my position," I corrected him gently. He felt I was a relic, lacking in vision. I could hear him breathing heavily, probably pacing. The boy's a fool, an arrogant, silver-spooned fool. His father would be ashamed. "Look, Liam, we need you. Name your price. I'll personally guarantee it. Just get in here and fix this mess." This was the moment, the crossroads. I could have gone back. I could have become the hero, the savior, riding in to fix the mess the Boy King had made. They would have paid me handsomely. Julian would have been humiliated, forced to eat crow, but ultimately he'd still be CEO. The system would be restored, but the disease would remain. "I don't think I can, Marcus," I said, and the sense of release was intoxicating. As Julian pointed out, I'm just a loyal aide. I'm not management material. I certainly don't have the clearance to override CEO-level directives, and Julian's last directive to me was to leave the premises. "To hell with his directives," Thorne roared. "I'm a member of the board. I'm telling you to come back. And I appreciate that, Marcus, but legally I'm a civilian. If I were to access Croft Innovation Systems now, it would be a federal crime. I'm sure you understand." I let that hang in the air. The veiled threat wasn't lost on him. He knew I knew how many laws we'd bent over the years. He knew I was the one who had encrypted the files that would prove it. I heard him curse, a long, vile string of words. "What do you want, Liam?" he asked, his voice now low and dangerous. "I want to finish my breakfast, Marcus, and I suggest you find a very good parachute. Goodbye." I hung up before he could respond. The rest of the day was a symphony of destruction, played out through desperate emails and frantic voicemails that I let go to a dedicated folder. A major European client terminated their contract, citing catastrophic service failure. The stock price, which I was now watching on a live ticker, began to plummet. News outlets started picking up the story. Tech giant Croft Innovations suffers mysterious global outage. Julian, in a fit of brilliance, issued a press release blaming a sophisticated cyber attack, which only served to scare investors more. By late afternoon, I got the call I was truly waiting for. It was from the company's general counsel, a shark named Peterson, whom I'd always loathed. "Liam," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Julian was under a lot of stress. The board has convened an emergency session. They've authorized me to offer you your old position back, with a significant pay rise and a formal apology from Julian." "An apology won't bring the client-facing servers back online, will it, Peterson?" He sighed, dropping the act. "No, it won't. Listen, the new IT team says the core programming is written in a proprietary language they've never seen. It's completely undocumented. They say it's like trying to read hieroglyphics. Only the original programmer could possibly navigate it." "That does sound like a problem," I mused. Of course it was a proprietary language. I'd written it myself, borrowing syntax from 3 different dead languages. I'd called it Labyrinthos. It was designed to be impenetrable to outsiders. Another one of old Mr. Croft's paranoid directives. "They also said something about a dead man's switch on a remote archive server," Peterson continued, his voice tight with anxiety. "Something that's scheduled to execute a full data wipe in, oh God, less than 24 hours. Liam, is that true?" "The Phoenix Project," I said softly. "What? What does a coffee machine have to do with this?" I laughed. It was a genuine, unrestrained laugh. It felt good. "Wrong project, Peterson. Julian was chasing the wrong ghost. The real Phoenix Project isn't a new chipset. It's a protocol. A final, irreversible reset. Mr. Croft called it the Scorched Earth Contingency, designed to erase the entire company, every byte of data, every patent, every contract, every dirty little secret, in the event the company was irretrievably compromised." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the blood draining from his face. "Compromised by who?" "By a fool in the captain's chair," I said. "Goodbye, Peterson." I turned off my phone. I didn't need it anymore. I knew what the next step would be. They were desperate. They had no cards left to play. Threats and money hadn't worked. So now they'd send the man himself. I tidied my apartment, put on a fresh shirt, and sat in my armchair, the one facing the door. I waited. Just after sundown, there was a frantic, insistent pounding on my apartment door. It wasn't a knock. It was the hammering of a man whose world had crumbled around him. I opened it to find Julian Croft, his perfect suit rumpled, his hair a mess, his face pale with sweat and terror. He looked pathetic. He looked broken. "Liam," he gasped, his voice cracking. "Please, you have to help me. You have to stop it." I leaned against the doorframe, looking at him not with anger, but with a profound sense of pity. "Stop what, Julian? I'm just a redundant asset. A relic. I have no vision. No, you were right. I was wrong. I'm an idiot. I'll give you anything," he pleaded, his eyes wild. "Money, stock options, a promotion, vice chairman. You can be vice chairman. Just tell me how to stop it." I looked past him, down the empty hallway, and then back into his desperate face. I gave him a small, sad smile. "There's only one way, Julian. You have to give me the keys." He blinked, confused. "The keys? What keys? To the office? I'll give you a new card, a new code, anything." "No, Julian," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, savoring the finality of it. "Not those keys. The real ones. You have to sign over your controlling stake in the company. All of it. To me." Julian stared at me as if I'd just asked him to donate a lung. The sheer audacity of my demand short-circuited his panic-addled brain. My stake?" he stammered. That's insane. That's everything. My father's legacy." "Your father's legacy is a smoking crater right now, Julian," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the steel doorframe I was leaning on. "A legacy you torched in less than 3 days. The stock is in freefall. Your clients have fled. Your servers are melting. And in approximately 12 hours, the deep archives, the company's soul, every blueprint, every patent, every piece of intellectual property that makes Croft Innovations worth more than the paper its name is printed on, will cease to exist. Permanently." I let the reality of it wash over him. I could see the gears turning, the denial fighting a losing battle against the catastrophic truth. He was a cornered animal. You can't be serious," he whispered, though his eyes told me he knew I was. "I'm as serious as a multi-billion-dollar corporate implosion. You want my help? You want me to stop the clock? Those are my terms. You will call Peterson, your lawyer, right now. You will have him draw up an irrevocable transfer of all your voting shares to me. You will sign it, and in exchange, I will save what's left of your father's company." I pushed myself off the doorframe. "You have 5 minutes to decide. After that, my offer expires, and I'm going to go watch a movie. I hear the world is full of them." I started to close the door. That was the final push he needed. "Wait," he yelled, sticking his hand out to stop the door. Okay. You win." The next hour was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Julian, a pathetic, trembling mess, sat on my couch making the most humiliating phone call of his life to Peterson. I could hear the lawyer's squawking protests, even from across the room. But there was nothing he could do. I was holding a gun to the company's head, and the only way to get my finger off the trigger was to give me the gun. The documents were drafted, sent via encrypted courier, and signed on my coffee table, witnessed by a bewildered notary I'd called from a 24-hour service. Julian Croft, the boy king, signed away his empire with a shaking hand. The moment the ink was dry, I walked over to my personal laptop, which had been sitting quietly on my desk the whole time. Julian watched me, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and hatred. I opened a simple command line interface. A single line of text blinked, waiting. Execute Phoenix Protocol? Abort? YN? I typed a single letter. Wesis. Then I entered the password, the one that only I knew. It wasn't a complex alphanumeric string. It was the name of Mr. Croft's childhood dog. Buster. I hit enter. On my second monitor, the cascade of red-line server warnings and critical error messages instantly stopped. A wave of green system stable and maintenance routine reset notifications scrolled up the screen. The meltdown was over. The doomsday clock was frozen at T-minus 11 hours and 42 minutes. "Is that it?" Julian asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Is it over?" "The immediate crisis, yes," I said, turning to face him. "The real work is just beginning." I picked up the signed documents. "Security will escort you from the premises now, Julian. You're a redundant asset. Your position has been eliminated." His face, a mask of disbelief and rage, was the most satisfying bonus I could have asked for. He tried to protest, to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. He was a hollowed-out shell. He had nothing left to bargain with. He left without another word. The next morning I walked back into the Croft Innovations building. I didn't need a key card. The news of the ownership transfer had spread like wildfire. The security guards who had escorted me out just days before now held the door open for me, their faces a mixture of awe and respect. I walked past my old desk and straight to the corner office. The first thing I did was disable the ridiculous voice and card-activated lock and restore the simple keypad. My first act as CEO was to call Sarah, the head of engineering. I promoted her to Chief Technology Officer and gave her a blank check to rebuild the IT department, starting with rehiring every single person Julian had fired. My second call was to Marcus Thorne and the board. I didn't yell or gloat. I simply laid out the facts. The company was mine, the bleeding had stopped, and a new era of competence was beginning. Anyone who didn't like it was welcome to sell their shares. No one did. It took months of grueling work. We had to rebuild trust with our clients, salvage our stock price, and purge the last remnants of Julian's disastrous tenure. I spent my days in the trenches, working alongside the engineers, the coders, the people who actually made the company run. I wasn't a visionary CEO in Julian's sense of the word. I didn't give slick presentations or talk about synergy. I just made sure the machine ran properly. One day, about 6 months in, Sarah came into my office, the old corner office, now filled with schematics and whiteboards instead of modern art, and dropped a financial report on my desk. "We're back in the black," she said, a tired but proud smile on her face. "Way ahead of schedule." I looked at the numbers. They were solid, stable, and built on a foundation of actual performance, not empty hype. It was the legacy old Mr. Croft had wanted. Not a shiny toy for his son, but a robust, innovative engine of progress. I had never wanted to be king. I had always been content to be the ghost in the machine, the loyal Cerberus guarding the gates. But when the king proved to be a fool, intent on burning down the castle, I learned that sometimes the only way to protect the kingdom is to take the throne yourself. Julian had been right about one thing. Loyalty doesn't innovate, but loyalty, when betrayed, can orchestrate one hell of a hostile takeover.